All right, so before we get into this, I just want to say, I thought I understood the Kevin Spacey story.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Like, genuinely, I thought I had a solid handle on what happened. The accusations, the fall, the trials. I thought I knew. I did not know. Because once I actually started going back through everything, the timeline, the institutions, the verdicts, the men who came forward, I realized that the story is so much more complicated, so much more painful, and honestly so much more disturbing than the version most people remember. So let's get into it. Kevin Spacey Fowler is born on July 26, 1959 in South Orange, New Jersey, youngest of 3 kids. His father, Thomas Fowler, is a technical writer with documented ties to white supremacist organizations. Kevin will acknowledge this publicly in adulthood, with visible discomfort. And okay, right there, before we even get to a single film or a single accusation, that detail matters. Because Kevin Spacey grows up in a house dominated by a man whose entire worldview is built around who is lesser than whom. And the way Kevin responds to that house is performance, theater, becoming someone else. That didn't come from nowhere. That came from a kid who desperately needed an exit. He gets into Juilliard, one of the most competitive performing arts schools in the world. He leaves after 2 years, too impatient, too certain of himself, already convinced the rules are suggestions and not requirements. That's the first sign, in retrospect. A man who decides, very early, that he is the exception to the structure everyone else has to follow. His stage work in New York in the early 80s is extraordinary. People who see him perform during this period still talk about it. There is a control to everything he does that is almost frightening. Warm, cold, funny, terrifying. Sometimes all of those things in the same sentence. Broadway notices, Hollywood follows. And then comes the usual suspects.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
1995. Roger Verbal Kint, a small, limping, seemingly harmless man who turns out to be the most dangerous person in the room. When the credits roll, audiences don't just applaud. They go back and watch the whole thing again, looking for the seams. There are none. Kevin Spacey wins the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He is 36 years old. And then American Beauty.
But it's hard to stay mad when there's so much beauty in the world.
1999. Another Oscar, back to back. Something only a handful of performers in history have ever done. At this point, he is not just famous. He is respected in the deepest sense of the word, the kind of respect that comes from peers who know exactly how difficult what you are doing actually is. And he is hiding something. He has been hiding it for years, possibly for his entire career. In 2003, Kevin Spacey is appointed artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre in London. On the surface, a remarkable second chapter, a major film star choosing the stage over the studio system, investing in something bigger than himself. But inside the Old Vic, a different story is taking shape. Employees during his tenure will later describe an environment that was, at minimum, deeply uncomfortable, at maximum, predatory. Young men, actors, assistants, staff members describe being targeted. They describe a pattern of behavior that was open enough for many people around it to see and yet never formally addressed. Because Kevin Spacey was the institution. Confronting him meant confronting the Old Vic itself. And nobody was willing to do that. He runs the Old Vic for 11 years. 11 years. The complaints accumulate quietly, the way complaints about powerful men always accumulate quietly. In private conversations, in warnings passed between young people entering the industry, in stories that everyone seems to have heard some version of, but that never make it into print. And I need you to sit with that number. 11 years. That is not an oversight. That is an architecture of silence. An entire institution with a board, with HR, with legal, that managed not to formally know what many people inside it informally knew. Kevin Spacey read that silence as permission for over a decade. And then, in 2013, he returns to America for a role that introduces him to a new generation, Frank Underwood. House of Cards, Netflix's first major original drama. A cold, calculating politician who looks directly into the camera and tells you exactly what he's doing and why, with a smile that dares you to stop him. The show becomes a phenomenon. He films 5 seasons. And here is the thing that nobody watching understood at the time: how thin the membrane was between Frank Underwood and Kevin Spacey. Frank believes power exempts him from the rules that govern everyone else. Frank believes desire, when it belongs to someone important enough, becomes its own justification. Kevin Spacey had been living that philosophy for decades. He just hadn't been playing it for a camera. October 29th, 2017. The date that changes everything. 3 weeks earlier, the New York Times had published its bombshell investigation into Harvey Weinstein. The story detonates like a bomb. Within weeks, the hashtag #MeToo ignites into a global movement. Hollywood is in freefall. Every day, a new name. Every day, a new reckoning. Into this moment steps Anthony Rapp. Rapp is an actor, best known for originating the role of Mark Cohen in Rent on Broadway. He gives an interview to BuzzFeed News in which he says that in 1986, when he was 14 years old, Kevin Spacey, who was 26, made a sexual advance toward him and placed him on a bed.
He was 14. And I want to stop there for a second because it is very easy to read past that number. 14. Not a young adult making a complicated choice in a complicated industry. A child. Kevin Spacey's response is, by most assessments, one of the worst crisis communications decisions in modern public life. He posts a statement saying he doesn't remember the encounter, he blames alcohol, and then, in the same statement, as though it naturally follows, he publicly comes out as a gay man for the first time. The reaction is immediate and ferocious. What he had done, intentionally or not, was attempt to use his coming out as a shield against an accusation of child sexual abuse. He had suggested a connection between his sexuality and the accusation. LGBTQ advocates condemn it as dangerous, offensive, and it accelerates everything. Netflix suspends House of Cards within days. Within weeks, they announce the show will continue without him.
By the way, do you watch Netflix anymore?
Probably as much as you watch Fox.
Fair. So that doesn't mean that you're gone though from Netflix. I don't even know if you're aware of this, but every time a person pulls up the Netflix app, you're there in some way. Have you seen this?
So it is bizarre that they decided to publicly cut ties with me on allegations alone, allegations that have now been proven false. Because I don't think there's any question. Netflix exists because of me. I put them on the map and they tried to put me in the ground.
His character will be killed off. The most powerful man on the most successful streaming drama in the world has been erased from his own show. And the accusations are only beginning. Over the following weeks and months, more men come forward. Many more. Old Vic employees, actors, men who encountered him at industry events. The stories share common elements. A pattern of targeting young men, men at the beginning of their careers, men who were professionally vulnerable, in situations where Spacey's authority made refusal feel impossible. By some counts, over 30 men will eventually make accusations of varying severity. The accusations span decades. They span continents. And what strikes investigators and journalists is not just the number. It is the consistency of the method described. This was not impulsive. This was not a man who occasionally lost control. The pattern that emerges is one of deliberate, calculated selection. Identifying targets who were young, ambitious, dependent, and therefore least likely to speak. It worked for approximately 30 years. Then comes the legal chapter. And this is where the story gets genuinely complicated. In 2022, the civil trial between Anthony Rapp and Kevin Spacey proceeds in federal court in New York. The jury deliberates. The verdict comes back, not liable. Kevin Spacey wins. And I genuinely had to sit with that for a minute.
Kevin Spacey has been found not guilty of 9 sex offences at that trial at Southwark Crown.
Because the verdict shocks a lot of people. His supporters point to it as vindication. His critics point out that a civil verdict is not a declaration of innocence, that the legal standard in a civil case is different from the moral weight of 30 accusers.
In 2023, he stands trial at Southwark Crown Court in London. 12 counts of sexual assault, 4 men, offenses alleged between 2001 and 2013. Kevin Spacey takes the stand himself. He is, in the witness box, what he has always been: composed, controlled, articulate, compelling. He has spent his entire life performing under pressure. The courtroom is simply another stage. The jury acquits him on all counts. 2 trials, 2 acquittals. And I don't know what to do with that, honestly. And I think if most of us are honest, neither do we. The legal system declined to find him criminally or civilly liable. And yet more than 30 men made accusations. Colleagues from multiple decades and multiple countries described the same pattern. The Old Vic conducted its own internal review and acknowledged inappropriate behavior occurred on its premises during his tenure. So, how do we hold all of that at once? Because here's the thing that Kevin Spacey's story forces us to confront in a way that is genuinely uncomfortable: the gap between what the law requires and what the evidence suggests. The difference between not guilty and innocent. The survivors, and regardless of legal outcomes, the men who came forward and described what happened to them deserve that word. They have not recanted. Their stories have not changed. And Kevin Spacey, acquitted, has begun to rebuild. He has given interviews. He has talked about returning to acting. The industry that erased him so completely in 2017 has not formally welcomed him back.
Where do you live now? Well, it's funny you asked that question.
But neither has every door remained permanently closed. There is something almost unbearable about watching that process. Because the men who came forward, the men whose courage triggered the investigations, the trials, the global conversation, they did not get a rebuild. They got a verdict. And verdicts, even favorable ones, do not undo what was done to them. They do not return the years spent carrying a story nobody wanted to hear. The asymmetry is stark and painful. Kevin Spacey gets to consider his next role. The men who accused him get to consider whether it was worth it. So here's where I land on all of this. He was, without question, one of the most gifted actors of his generation. He also used the power that gift gave him in ways that caused real harm to real people. The legal system decided the evidence did not reach the threshold required for liability. The people who say he harmed them are still living with whatever he did. Talent does not cancel cruelty. Acquittal does not erase accusation.
But the part of the story I keep coming back to, the part that I think gets overlooked every time, is not Kevin Spacey at all. It is the industry that protected him for 30 years. The Old Vic knew, or should have known. The people who warned each other quietly about rooms not to be alone in, they knew. The agents and managers and executives who heard whispers and chose not to hear them, they knew something. An entire industry built on talent above everything else looked at Kevin Spacey and decided what he was doing in private was not their problem, until it became everyone's problem. The most powerful man in Hollywood had a secret, and Hollywood kept it for him for 30 years. That secret has a cost. It was paid by every young man who walked into a room with Kevin Spacey and walked out changed. It is still being paid. Remember that. Not the Oscars, not Frank Underwood, not the performances that genuinely were among the greatest of their generation. Remember the cost. Remember who paid it. and ask yourself why it took so long for anyone to make them stop. If this story stayed with you, if you found yourself unable to look away, then there is another video on your screen right now that was made for you. Click it. I think you already know you want to.